Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the West Suffolk series, 103 parishes set in some of the most beautiful English countryside, and there's some good ones in this area. Shall we go have a look? Of course. Welcome back to West Suffolk again, folks. Time for another wander around this beautiful part of East Anglia. Today I brought you to a lovely little village, and I know it's lovely because I've just driven around it to start this episode off. Welcome to the parish of Gazeley. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Gazeley, Gaegi's Clearing. Welcome back to West Suffolk again, everyone, and today we're in Gazeley, another village that lies a couple of miles south of the A14 close to Newmarket. Surrounded on all sides by lush green countryside, it's this village where the surnames Gazeley, Gazlay and Gazlay all derive from. It depends how much of a romantic you are, but some locals think the village is so named because it literally gazes over the cathedral city of Ely. There is some credence to that theory because on a clear day you can see Ely's cathedral on the horizon. Although we do love a little bit of local folklore, in truth it actually means woodland clearing belonging to Gaegi. As well as Gazeley itself, the parish also contains the hamlet of Needum Street, as well as the site of two historical landmarks, Denham Castle and Desning Hall. It also has an old windmill and a central parish church too. The Icknield Way passes through the middle of the village at Tithe Close, and the area as a whole is focused on horse racing and the breeding and training of racehorses. Gazeley has a stud and a training yard. It's the sort of place you could cycle through using Sustrans Route 51 and imagine wistfully that you've won the lottery and you could move to. Let's see if I can sell it enough to convince anyone to relocate. Before we walk anywhere, we first have to discuss two important historical sites which fall within Gazeley Parish. These are a long way to the southeast of the main settlement and are both inaccessible due to being on private roads. The first is the site of Desning Hall, sometimes pronounced Denham and historically called Desling. The manor of Desning, which once owned Gazeley's church, was granted by William the Conqueror to Richard de Clare. For 400 years from 1124, the vicar of Gazeley was appointed by Stoke Priory, which he controlled. Desning Hall, a Saxon building, no longer exists. Its last resident was Sidney Arthur King, who left the property in 1927. The house then stood vacant until the early 1980s, when it was demolished. All that remains now are cottages and farm buildings. The other landmark is the earthwork remains of a 12th century Motte and Bailey castle. Named Denham Castle or Castle Holes, this was known as Desning Castle at the time of its construction. There'll be some more on this in the Denham episode. We begin our journey around Gazeley on Mill Road. Its name is a reference to a tower mill that stands to the north of the village, which we'll catch later. The property ahead of us here is the coach house, which is sort of our end point later. Gazley is primarily a linear settlement. It's only within the last 80 years that this arrangement has changed. The oldest houses still line the central street, whilst in at least 3 locations around it there are areas of post-war housing. All of the village's main landmarks lie around a central village green. This is Higham Road, a windy lane that runs to the neighbouring village we covered last week. Gazeley lies in a valley below Higham, meaning in places this road is certainly not flat. We're crossing a green here. This is not the main village green because that's near the church. Instead, this one can be found at Tithe Close. This is Gazeley's newest development, having been built on the site of the old village allotments in the 1970s. The allotments, as a result, were moved to the northern end of Gazeley, next to the local primary school. Now at this point I was supposed to follow a footpath which forms a neat little loop onto the street, the main road south towards Denham. However, this went slightly wrong. I thought I was following the path, but somehow it ended up in this abandoned farmyard. Not what I was intending. Luckily I could still carry on, but it meant vaulting a gate to do so. Where exactly the path was supposed to come out, I'm not totally sure, but at least I was still in the right place. This is the street, and here we're looking north, back towards the village centre. Next, it's the Highwood housing estate. This was built onto the southwestern side of the village immediately after World War II. Most of it dates from the 1950s. It's a mixed estate of mostly private properties and some social, the latter being managed by Flagship Housing. With the exception of Tithe Close and Mill View, this is the only major area of new housing that's been added to Gazeley since wartime, and it's the biggest to boot. Its construction greatly increased the population, so it's a good thing there are some amenities in this village. At the end of Stubbins Lane you'll find one of Gazeley's 2 recreation grounds. This one has a playground and a big open green space. The other one, just south of the Highwood estate and alongside the street, has facilities for both football and cricket. Stubbins Lane is a lot older than the Highwood estate. It has a few flint-faced properties, common in Suffolk, and one of the village's listed buildings, namely the Hutch. It runs to the green before turning left, but that's where we'll turn back on ourselves briefly to the right to catch the village hall. Gazeley's village hall is right in the heart of civilization. It was left in trust to the village in the 1930s and is run by a management committee. Various organisations use it on a regular basis, including Denham and Gazley WI, the Gazeley History Society and a local table tennis club. The hall also offers excellent facilities for private hire. It's where the parish notice board can be found, so tick off Gazeley folks, that's 7 down and 96 to go. Dead opposite the hall we see a collection of newish houses as we turn around now towards the central village green. There are much older houses both on and around the green, as you might expect, given this is the oldest part of Gazeley. It's also where you can catch a bus. Gazeley is served by the number 312, which runs between the towns of Newmarket and Bury St Edmunds. Overlooking the green is the Chequers, a 400-year-old pub. Munson's Brewery, well known for their craft beers, are based here. The pub was commonly known as Munson's until the property was acquired by Green King Brewery and renamed the Chequers in the 1700s. The green itself is a landmark. This stone was difficult to read, but here you're standing over a well which goes to an insane depth of 183 feet. Right beside it is the old red phone box, but this one's just an empty shell. Also on the green is an abandoned building which has seen better days. Google Street View shows this to have once been some sort of garage. Here also is a board that shows you the local footpaths. This mentions the popular Three Churches Walk, which takes in those at Denham and Moulton, as well as All Saints, here in Gazeley. All Saints is a Grade 1 listed building dating back to the early 14th century. It occupies a commanding position at the heart of the village and is the central church of its benefice, one that contains 5 villages. It's been a centre of worship and community celebration for over 800 years. The church has undergone a programme of repair and renovation over the past couple of decades. In 2004, floodlighting and path lights were installed, and these are sponsored by residents of the village on a weekly basis. There are regular services here which are held twice a month. This one was open too, so let's have a little look around. Here we're in the nave looking towards the chancel and the enormous east window, one of the star features of a deliciously well-kept interior, full of interest. Some of the smaller features of this church, such as its grotesques and corbels, have been catalogued by a photographer by the name of Simon Johnson and turned into a display, seen here. On the north wall of the nave, you'll also find the War Memorial. This lists 15 names, all local men who died in World War I. As you leave the churchyard, you'll pass this building, the Old National School, which was built in 1843. Gazley no longer has an educational establishment. It used to have a Church of England school located on Mill Road, but that closed in 2004, meaning the local children now have to travel elsewhere. A few steps later and we pass a couple more notable old buildings both on the western side of the street. These are firstly All Saints Vicarage, and then the building it replaced, the old rectory, which is right next door to the coach house. Like neighbouring Higham, which used to be within Gazeley Parish, the village is on Sus Trans Route 51, so the cyclists out there may well recognise this one. Here's a quick look up Moulton Road, which is where Gazeley stood and its associated training yard is located. I was loving this big red house on the corner, by the way. Next to it is a vastly overgrown pond, something of a swamp at the moment. It was nice though to imagine how it might once have looked as the village's focal point. We're back to Mill Road again now to make the short walk back to the car. Okay, we're back to where we began here at Mill View. We're not quite done with Gazeley just yet though, because there are two more things that I want to mention in this episode. You see, Gazeley also has a hamlet within its boundaries called Needum Street. So now we're going to put the camera on the dash and take a drive through that. When we've done that, we're going to head for the next village, and right on the parish boundary there's a rather large landmark that looms tall over this part of West Suffolk. As you head north out of Gazeley, you pass the old windmill. You can't really see it from this direction, but fear not, on the way back you get a much better view. First, we're off to the hamlet of Needham Street. Historically known simply as Needham, it's a linear settlement that spans about half a mile between Gazeley and Kentford Interchange on the A14. It's a very rural place and has a total of just 10 properties and their associated farm buildings. You could so easily dismiss it as disinteresting. However, there is one listed building here, the late 15th or early 16th century Needham Hall, which is timber framed. It was, though, unfortunately for us, obstructed by trees. Needham's centre is marked by a pretty little green. Let's turn around here and make our way back to Gazeley via the old Tower Mill. It was built in 1837 by the very unfortunately named William Death. It was built to replace a former post mill nearby. When it was active, it drove 5 pairs of millstones. The mill ceased work in 1920 and it was stripped of its machinery before eventually being converted into a house in 1947. The mill isn't the only tall structure that towers over Gazeley. If you drive towards Moulton, you'll be met with Gazeley Water Tower. This is actually within Moulton Parish, but it's right on the border. It's one of the smaller towers operated by Anglian Water, and it holds 0.2 megalitres when full. Time to move on. That's been Gazeley, and I'll see you in Moulton next week for the final parish in this run in West Suffolk. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.